Today I have another Brexit benefit because experts have warned that the UK's regulations are now lagging behind those of the EU and that Britons will be exposed to more toxic chemicals as a result. For example, a report by the Institute for Environmental Policy found that the UK government's weakening of air pollution regulations could lead to 6,000 additional deaths per year. And there are a number of reasons why experts are concerned about the UK's chemicals regulations. One reason is that the UK government has weakened or repealed a number of environmental regulations since leaving the EU. For example, in 2021, the government weakened regulations on air pollution, I also mentioned, and in 2022, it repealed regulations on the use of pesticides in agriculture. Another reason is that the UK has not yet fully implemented the EU's REACH regulation of that time, which was a comprehensive system for regulating chemicals, and in the EU it still is. And this means that there are a number of chemicals that are still not regulated in the UK or that are regulated to a lesser extent than in the EU. And as a result of these changes, experts now warn that Britons will be indeed exposed to more toxic chemicals. For example, the study I mentioned from the Institute for Environmental Policy, they found that this is really a dangerous and life-threatening thing. I told you the numbers earlier. The UK government has defended its record on environmental regulation. They are arguing that they are committed to protecting public health and the environment. However, experts warn that the UK's current approach to regulation is putting public health at risk. And in addition to the report by the Institute for Environmental Policy, a number of other experts have raised concerns about the UK's chemicals regulations. For example, the Royal Society of Chemistry has warned that the UK is falling behind the EU in the terms of chemicals regulation, and the Environmental Law Foundation has warned that the UK government is putting public health at risk by weakening environmental regulations. The UK government's decision to weaken or repeal a number of environmental regulations since leaving the EU is indeed a cause for concern. And these changes could indeed lead to Britons being exposed to more toxic chemicals, and they could also damage the UK's reputation as a leader in environmental protection. The UK government needs to take urgent action to strengthen its chemicals regulatory framework if it wants to protect public health, but also the environment. As I said, the government has defended its record on environmental regulation, and they say that they are committed to protecting public health and the environment. But the experts are all of a different opinion. They say the regulation that are in place are putting public health at risk at the moment. UK REACH is the United Kingdom's national chemicals regulatory framework. It is based on the European Union's registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals, that's REACH, regulation, which was adopted in 2006. UK REACH aims to protect human health and the environment from the risk posed by chemicals. It does this by requiring companies to register their chemicals with the UK government and to provide information about their safety. And the government then officially evaluates the safety of these chemicals and may take action to restrict their use if they are found to be hazardous, officially. The UK REACH is a complex piece of legislation, and it is important to note that it's still under development. I have to give them that, but the government is currently consulting on a number of proposals to amend the regulations, and it is possible that the proposals will be implemented in the future, but they haven't been. And despite its complexity, UK REACH is an important tool for protecting human health and the environment if used properly. It is essential that businesses are aware of their obligations under the regulations and that they take steps to comply with them. And all companies that manufacture or import chemicals into the UK must register their chemicals with the UK government, as I said. But the problem is what is on the lists of the government at the moment. And what do they restrict? But for certain particularly hazardous chemicals, companies must obtain an authorization from the government before they can use them. But also that depends on the government lists. The government may restrict the use of chemicals if they are found to pose an unacceptable risk to human health or the environment. But what is an unacceptable risk in the UK? As I said, UK REACH is a complex piece of legislation, but an important tool for protecting human health and the environment if used properly. But there are several reasons why UK REACH is falling behind EU REACH. The UK government has faced challenges in building up the capacity and resources necessary to fully implement and enforce UK REACH, which is, as I said, a complex and comprehensive regulatory system. And this has led to delays in the registration, evaluation and authorization processes for chemicals. And it has also made it more difficult to enforce the regulations against companies that are not compliant. And the UK government has made a number of decisions to diverge from EU REACH since Brexit. These decisions have been driven by a desire to reduce regulatory burdens on businesses and to promote innovation. However, they have also led to a weakening of protections for human health and the environment. And is that really a Brexit benefit? The UK government has placed a greater emphasis on economic growth and trade than on environmental protection since Brexit. And this has led to a reluctance to implement new or more stringent regulations on chemicals, even if these regulations are necessary to protect public health. The UK government has been criticized for its lack of transparency and public engagement in the development and implementation of UK REACH as well. This has made it difficult for stakeholders to understand the changes that are being made and to hold the government accountable for its decisions. The UK government has not yet implemented a number of key provisions of EU REACH from the time they were a member, such as the requirement for companies to provide substitution plans for hazardous chemicals. The UK government has taken, as I said, a more lenient approach to the evaluation of chemicals than the EU, which has led to a number of hazardous chemicals being approved for use in the UK that would not have been approved in the EU. And the UK government has fewer resources to enforce UK REACH than the EU, which has led to a lower level of compliance with the regulations. And these were just a few examples of how UK REACH is falling behind EU REACH. It is clear that the UK government needs to take urgent action to strengthen its chemicals regulatory framework if it wants to protect public health and the environment. As a result of these factors, UK REACH is falling behind EU REACH in terms of both the level of protection for human health and the environment and the effectiveness of its implementation. And this is putting Britons at risk of exposure to harmful chemicals. And this is also damaging, as I said earlier, the UK's reputation as a leader in environmental protection. And the UK REACH falling behind EU REACH will affect the health of British people in a number of ways. One of the main concerns about the UK's chemicals regulations is that they will lead to Britons being exposed to more toxic chemicals, as I said. And this is because of the weakened or repealed number of environmental regulations since leaving the EU, and that they never fully implemented the EU's REACH regulation before. And as a result, there are a number of chemicals that are still not regulated in the UK, or that are regulated to a lesser extent than in the EU. And these chemicals can be harmful to human health, and exposure to them can lead to a number of health problems, including cancer, respiratory problems, and reproductive problems. And another concern about the UK's chemicals regulation is that they will lead to reduced air quality. This is because the UK government has weakened regulations on air pollution since leaving the EU. I said that in the beginning of the video. And as a result, there are a number of pollutants that are now allowed in the air at levels that are higher than they were before Brexit. And these pollutants can be harmful to human health, and exposure to them can lead to a number of health problems, including respiratory problems, heart disease, and cancer. And another concern about the UK's chemicals regulation is that they will lead to increased risk of water contamination. This is because the UK government has repealed regulations on the use of pesticides in agriculture since leaving the EU. And as a result, there are a number of pesticides that are now being used more widely in the UK, and these pesticides can contaminate water supplies. Exposure to contaminated water can be harmful to human health, and it can lead to a number of health problems, including cancer, reproductive problems, and even neurological problems. In addition to these specific health concerns, the UK's chemicals regulations falling behind EU REACH also have a more general impact on public health. This is because the UK's chemicals regulations are an important part of the UK's public health infrastructure. They help to protect people from exposure to harmful chemicals in the first place, and they also help to ensure that products that are sold in the UK are safe to use. And if the UK's chemical regulations fall behind EU REACH, this could lead to a decline in the overall safety of products that are sold in the UK, and it could also lead to an increase in the number of people who are exposed to harmful chemicals. And this could have a significant impact on public health in the UK. The UK government, I said it several times, but it's important, needs to take urgent action to strengthen its chemicals regulatory framework if it wants to protect public health. And this includes fully implementing the EU's REACH regulation they signed before, and it also includes strengthening regulations on air pollution and water contamination. The UK government also needs to invest in capacity and resources to ensure that it can effectively implement and enforce its chemicals regulations. And now the Brexiteers will say we don't have to implement the EU REACH because we left the EU. Yeah, but, well, some others will now say that my question is stupid that I'm asking now, but does mean leaving the EU, leaving behind common sense? Okay, common sense and Brexit. Okay, I get it, but this is a serious topic, and it's really important that there is a focus on public health in these things, and economic growth on the cost of the health of the people. We've done that long enough, and I think it's really time to have a look at some role models there. Even if you call it shackles of the EU, I call it protecting people's lives. And if you want to know something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.